Welcome to Daily Global Motivation, the channel where your transformation isn't just encouraged, it's demanded, ignited, and fueled by the unstoppable fire inside you that has been quietly waiting for the right moment to explode into action. And today, that moment has arrived with a force that cannot be ignored because you are finally stepping into a space where your potential is seen, your strength is recognized, and your future is treated like the powerful masterpiece it truly is. This is the place where excuses come to die, where limitations get crushed, and where every day you return becomes a declaration that you are ready to rise above the chaos of your own thoughts and take control of the life you were meant to lead with clarity, courage, and conviction, even when distractions and doubts try to pull you back into the shadows. So before we go any further, make sure you subscribe, like, comment, and share this video with someone who needs to feel this energy today. Because what's coming next has the power to shift your entire reality if you allow it to sink into the core of who you are and awaken the part of you that refuses to settle for anything less than greatness. Now let's dive into today's message, because it's time to stop letting your mind control you, and time to take back your power right now. There comes a moment in every person's life when they must confront the uncomfortable truth that the majority of the battles they fight each day are not happening in the world around them, but inside the endless storm of thoughts swirling within their own mind. A storm that whispers fear, doubt, hesitation, and limitations constantly, until those thoughts become chains that wrap around their potential and drag them deeper into frustration and stagnation. For years, you may have believed that your circumstances were the reason you felt stuck. But if you look closer, you'll see that the real prison was built from the beliefs you repeated, the fears you protected, and the excuses you nurtured, all created by a mind that learned to dominate you rather than serve you. Your mind is powerful, yes, but that power becomes dangerous when it operates without discipline, without awareness, and without direction, turning into a force that holds you back instead of pushing you forward toward the life you deserve. Every time you told yourself you weren't enough, every time you convinced yourself to quit before you even started, every time you surrendered to anxiety, you strengthened the grip of that unruly inner voice, giving it control that never should have been in its hands. But today, you begin to break that pattern, because once you recognize the mind's tricks, once you expose the lies it tells to keep you comfortable and safe, you take your first step toward reclaiming the power that was always yours. And when you take that step, something remarkable happens. The mind, which once overpowered you, becomes a tool, a weapon, a servant that can work in your favor rather than against you. This shift doesn't happen overnight, but the moment you decide to stop believing the thoughts that limit you and start choosing the ones that liberate you, your entire world begins to change. You will feel resistance, you will feel fear, you will feel discomfort, but those sensations are signs that you're no longer trapped, that you're expanding, and that your power is awakening. The truth is simple. You've been controlled by your mind for too long, but now you are learning to lead it instead of being led by it. And when you decide to claim that leadership, you unlock a level of strength, clarity, and confidence that most people never experience, because most people never dare to confront themselves with the honesty that transformation requires. The mind loves familiarity. It clings to routines, patterns, and old emotional wounds because they make it feel safe, even when those habits destroy your progress and poison your happiness. And this is why breaking free feels so difficult. You're not just fighting bad habits, you're fighting the psychological comfort your mind has built around them. Whenever you try to grow, evolve, or step into a new version of yourself, your mind reacts like an alarm system, generating fear-based thoughts designed to pull you back into what feels predictable, even if that predictability is miserable, unfulfilling, or harmful. You have to understand this mechanism, because when you do, you stop taking those thoughts personally and Start recognizing them as survival patterns, not truths, not warnings, not destiny. When your mind says, "you can't," it's rarely speaking from logic, it's reacting from fear, from past pain, from old memories that you have outgrown, but haven't yet confronted. But the moment you begin questioning these thoughts instead of obeying them, you weaken their authority and reclaim your right to choose your own path. This is why awareness is the first stage of liberation. Once you see the pattern, you can interrupt it, and once you interrupt it, you can replace it with something stronger, something aligned with the life you want to build. You owe it to yourself to challenge every thought that tries to shrink you, to silence every inner voice that speaks in limitation, and to replace every mental barrier with a belief rooted in capacity, courage, and purpose. Because when you stop letting your mind dictate the narrative, you finally create space for a new identity to emerge, an identity shaped by your power, not your fear. This transformation requires discipline, but it also requires compassion, because you are not fighting your mind, you are retraining it, guiding it, teaching it how to support your goals instead of sabotaging them. And the more you practice this, the stronger you become, until eventually you reach a point where the thoughts that once terrified you lose their influence entirely, and you step into a freedom most people only dream of. Every day, countless people surrender their potential because they mistakenly believe that their thoughts are facts, that the stories in their minds are accurate reflections of reality, when in truth those stories are often distorted echoes of fear, insecurity, or past experiences that no longer define who they are or what they are capable of achieving. This mental distortion is powerful because it feels real, it feels convincing, it feels urgent, but feeling is not evidence. And yet the mind persuades you to accept those feelings as reality, keeping you trapped in cycles of hesitation and self-doubt that slowly suffocate your ambition. When you start questioning the stories your mind tells, everything changes, because suddenly you are no longer controlled by assumptions. You are guided by intention, clarity, and self-awareness. The mind may scream that you are not strong enough, but evidence from your life proves otherwise, because you've survived every challenge you thought would break you, outgrown situations you thought would define you, and risen from moments when you believed you had nothing left. The problem isn't your strength. The problem is your belief in the thoughts that hide your strength from you. Once you expose this truth, you begin rewriting your internal narrative, replacing the script of fear with one of power, conviction, and resilience. This new narrative doesn't eliminate fear, but it transforms your relationship with fear, allowing you to feel it without being controlled by it, to acknowledge it without retreating from your goals. And when you live from this place of grounded power, your mind becomes an ally, not an enemy, shaping thoughts that support your growth rather than restrict it. This shift is not just psychological, it's emotional, physical, and spiritual, affecting every aspect of how you show up in the
world. And the more you practice choosing empowering thoughts, the more natural it becomes, until your inner world reflects the strength, discipline, and determination you've been cultivating all along. Your mind has been conditioned by years of repetition, meaning the thoughts that dominate your consciousness today are the result of beliefs you've fed, stories you've accepted, and fears you've
reinforced over and over until they became automatic, effortless, and deeply rooted in your identity. This is why it's so difficult to change your inner dialogue. It's a habit, a reflex, a pattern that has been strengthened through years of emotional reinforcement, not a simple switch you can flip overnight. But habits can be reprogrammed, identities can be reshaped, and internal narratives can be rewritten when you choose to replace old patterns with intentional, consistent, empowering repetition that aligns with your true potential. You must understand that the mind does not fight you because it hates you. It fights because it tries to protect you, based on outdated definitions of what safety means. Definitions built on past pain, past failures, or past limitations that no longer represent who you are today. This is why inner transformation requires patience, discipline, and consistency. You're not just changing thoughts. You're teaching your mind a new way to process life, challenges, and uncertainty. And the more you reinforce your new identity with aligned action, the more your mind begins to trust this new version of you, gradually releasing its grip on fear-driven thinking. This process may feel uncomfortable, but discomfort is proof that you are expanding, that you are stepping into new territory your mind hasn't fully mapped yet, and that you are no longer living inside the constraints of who you used to be. Every time you choose courage over doubt, discipline over distraction, and purpose over excuses, you strengthen your new identity piece by piece, inch by inch, moment by moment. And eventually, the mind that once controlled you begins to follow your lead, responding to your direction instead of dragging you backward into old patterns. This is the moment you begin experiencing true freedom, the freedom to think clearly, act decisively, and live intentionally without being sabotaged by the noise inside your head. The most powerful realization you can have on this journey is understanding that you are not your thoughts. You are the awareness behind them, the consciousness observing them, the presence choosing whether to accept, reject, or reshape them. And this distinction changes everything because it gives you back the control you didn't even know you lost. Your mind can produce fear, but you do not have to obey it. It can generate doubt, but you do not have to believe it. It can replay memories of pain, but you do not have to relive them. When you begin to separate yourself from the mental noise, you gain the ability to choose which thoughts become part of your identity and which ones you discard like dust shaking off your shoulders. This internal separation is the foundation of mental strength, because once you realize that thoughts are just mental events, not commands, not truths, not rules, you gain the freedom to create the inner world you want, not the one you inherited from past conditioning. This awareness allows you to observe your mind without being consumed by it, creating space between impulse and action, between fear and decision, between doubt and purpose. And within that space is your power, the power to choose, to reshape, to decide who you are and who you refuse to be. The more you practice this separation, the more you will notice that your thoughts begin losing their emotional grip, and the less control they have over your behaviors, reactions, and confidence. People who master this separation become unstoppable, not because they don't fear or doubt, but because they no longer let those thoughts determine the direction of their lives. This freedom is available to you right now, and the moment you decide to claim it, you begin stepping into a new era of your life where your thoughts serve your purpose rather than sabotage it. Your mind has spent years shaping your reality through repetition, and the beliefs it repeats most often are the ones you end up accepting as truth, even when those beliefs contradict your potential, your goals, and the future you want to build. Every day you wake up with the opportunity to create a new mental pattern, but most people default to the old ones simply because they have not learned how to interrupt the automatic flow of thoughts that keeps them locked in the same emotional cycles. This cycle continues until you consciously decide to step in, challenge the narrative, and take responsibility for the direction your thoughts pull you. Because without that decision, your mind will continue running on autopilot. But when you finally pause and question a thought like, "I can't," you weaken the foundation that has supported years of fear-based thinking, and you begin building a new mental structure based on your true capability instead of your past limitations. This act of questioning is not just a tactic. It's a courageous stand you take against the invisible forces that have dictated your actions in silence. When you question your thoughts, you slowly detach from the emotional power they once held, and you begin recognizing how many of them were never rooted in truth to begin with. This is where your transformation begins, not in the absence of fear, but in the refusal to believe that fear determines your destiny. Through consistent practice, you start noticing that your inner world shifts, your confidence grows, and your decisions become aligned with the version of yourself you are becoming, not the version you've been running from. And as this shift continues, you begin to experience the profound realization that you are stronger than every thought that has ever tried to stop you. And that strength becomes the fuel that drives your transformation forward. When you consciously rewrite these patterns, your mind slowly learns to follow your leadership, and every day you gain more control over the direction of your life. This is where your power begins to return, one thought, one challenge, one internal victory at a time. Underscore. Every fear you feel, every hesitation you experience, and every moment you freeze in uncertainty is rooted in a thought that your mind magnified to protect you from discomfort. And understanding this truth gives you the ability to navigate your emotions with more clarity and control. Your mind is not trying to sabotage you, it's trying to keep you safe by avoiding risk. But the problem is that growth itself is a risk, and every version of your future requires you to step outside the emotional boundaries your mind tries to enforce. When you learn to differentiate between emotional signals designed to protect you and mental narratives designed to limit you, your entire life begins to shift in extraordinary ways. Instead of avoiding opportunities out of fear, you begin leaning into them because you recognize that discomfort is not a threat. It's a doorway to the next level of your evolution. And when you embrace that doorway, you stop running from the parts of yourself that scare you and start confronting them with strength and clarity. The mind will always try to pull you back toward what feels familiar, but familiarity is not the same as fulfillment. And many people spend their entire lives stuck in routines that feel safe, but steal their potential. You deserve more than the comfort that destroys your ambition. You deserve the growth that expands your identity, your skill, your courage, and your confidence. But to earn that growth, you must be willing to feel fear without letting it dictate your decisions. This is how warriors are built, not through the absence of fear, but through mastery over it. And once you gain even a glimpse of that mastery, you will feel a shift inside you, a quiet but powerful awakening that whispers, "I am capable of more than my mind has allowed me to believe." That whisper becomes a roar that drowns out the doubt, and from that moment forward, your life begins to unfold in ways you never imagined possible. Underscore. One of the greatest lies your mind tells you is that you need to feel confident before you take action, when in reality action is what creates confidence, not the other way around. Your mind loves to convince you that you're not ready yet, that you need more time, more information, more courage, when in truth you need none of those things to start. You only need willingness. Too many people wait for the perfect emotional state before moving toward their goals. But the perfect emotional state never arrives because the mind uses delay as a survival tactic, keeping you stuck in hesitation as a way to avoid uncertainty. Longer you wait, the deeper the hesitation becomes, and the more convincing your mind sounds when it tells you to stay still, remain comfortable, and avoid the unfamiliar. But when you take action, especially small action, you interrupt the mind's power, breaking its illusion of danger and proving to yourself that you can move forward even when you don't feel ready. This proof becomes a weapon, a tool, a psychological breakthrough that rewires your brain for courage instead of caution. Every small step you take builds evidence that you are capable, which weakens the old beliefs that once held you down. And slowly, your identity shifts, not because your thoughts changed first, but because your actions forced your mind to adapt. This is the true path to confidence. You act first, and your mind adjusts afterward, eventually aligning with the new version of yourself you are becoming. When you finally understand this, procrastination loses its influence, fear loses its grip, and the excuses that once controlled your behavior become powerless. Action becomes your new foundation, and through that action, your mind learns to stop controlling you and start supporting you. Your inner voice is shaped by the people you've listened to, the environments you've survived, and the experiences you've endured, which means the narrative you hear today may not actually belong to you, but to the influences that once surrounded you. Many of the fears you carry were inherited. Many of the limits you believe were absorbed. And many of the doubts that whisper through your mind were never yours to begin with. When you realize this, you begin separating your authentic identity from the identity your environment tried to impose on you. And that separation is one of the most powerful steps you will ever take in reclaiming your freedom. You must ask yourself, whose voice is this? Whose fear am I carrying? Whose belief am I repeating? And the moment you start asking these questions, you begin uncovering the truth that your mind is filled with echoes that do not reflect your potential. These echoes lose their power when exposed, because awareness disrupts the illusion that they define you, and you reclaim the right to choose which beliefs shape your future. You have permission to release the voices that conditioned you to play small, the expectations that pressured you to limit your ambition, and the fears that were projected onto you by people who never learned to overcome their own. With every belief you shed, your true self becomes clearer, stronger, and more aligned with the path you were meant to walk. And as you shed these inherited fears, you begin experiencing a sense of liberation that feels like breathing deeply for the first time. After years of shallow breaths, this clarity becomes a guiding force, a new compass that directs your actions from authenticity rather than fear. And once you begin living from this place, your mind becomes quiet, not empty, but aligned, grounded, and supportive of your growth in a way you may have never felt before. There comes a point when you realize that the greatest breakthroughs in life happen the moment you stop negotiating with your excuses and start demanding more from yourself, because excuses are the mind's last line of defense against change. Your excuses sound logical, reasonable, and even protective because they were built to keep you in your comfort zone. And the comfort zone is the most dangerous place you can live when you aspire to grow. Every time you tell yourself you're too tired, not ready, too overwhelmed, or not capable enough, your mind tightens its grip on your potential, convincing you to surrender your power without even realizing it. But when you finally call out those excuses for what they are, barriers, not truths, you begin breaking the mental patterns that have held you captive for years. The moment you stop believing the stories that justify your inaction, you expose the fear beneath them, and once fear is exposed, it begins to crumble. This confrontation takes courage because it requires you to admit that the only thing standing between you and the life you want has been the mental narratives you've accepted. Every time you push through an excuse, no matter how small the action, you weaken the mind's ability to manipulate your behavior. And slowly, something incredible happens. You begin trusting yourself more than your fears. This trust becomes the foundation of a new identity, an identity defined by strength, discipline, and resilience instead of hesitation. The more you prove to yourself that you can move forward despite discomfort, the more unstoppable you become, because your actions start to speak louder than the doubts in your mind. And once your actions become louder than your excuses, the mind stops controlling your destiny and starts aligning with the person you are becoming. One of the greatest powers you possess is the ability to direct your focus, because whatever you choose to focus on grows, expands, and begins shaping your emotional state, your decisions, and your entire life. Most people never learn to control their focus, so their mind drags them toward negativity, fear, and distraction, creating a reality that mirrors the chaos inside their thoughts. But when you take control of your focus, intentionally choosing what to give energy to, you begin transforming not just how you think, but how you feel, act, and experience the world. Focus is the steering wheel of your mind, and if you don't hold it firmly, your thoughts will wander into places that drain your strength and weaken your ambition. When you discipline your focus, you discipline your life, because you stop feeding the mental patterns that have been sabotaging your progress. This means choosing to focus on solutions instead of problems, effort instead of obstacles, and potential instead of past failures. At first, this shift may feel unnatural, because your mind is conditioned to look for danger and negativity as a survival mechanism. But with practice, your focus becomes a weapon, cutting through mental noise and redirecting your energy toward what actually matters. Over time, the mind begins adapting to your new patterns, creating thoughts that support your growth instead of undermining it. This is how you reclaim your mental power, by deciding what deserves your attention and refusing to entertain anything that weakens your spirit. Your focus becomes your shield, your strategy, and your internal compass, leading you toward the life you were meant to create. And once you master it, nothing can distract you from your purpose. One of the most dangerous traps your mind sets is convincing you to compare your journey to others, because comparison destroys confidence faster than failure ever could. When you compare yourself to someone else, you're not just measuring progress, you're adopting a narrative that says their path is more valuable, their pace is more correct, and their success is more legitimate than your own. This lie steals your joy, poisons your motivation, and makes you forget that your story, your challenges, and your growth are uniquely yours. The mind uses comparison to keep you stuck by convincing you that you are behind, when in reality you are exactly where you need to be to grow into your next level. When you break free from comparison, you liberate yourself from a mental prison that was never meant to contain you in the first place. You begin recognizing that your path is not a race, but a personal transformation that unfolds at the pace your soul requires. You stop using other people's success as a measure of your worth and start using it as inspiration to elevate your own journey. When you redirect your energy from comparison to contribution, focusing on what you can improve rather than what others have achieved, you create a shift in your mindset that exposes the illusion of inadequacy created by comparison. This shift empowers you to celebrate your own progress, no matter how small, because you realize that growth is growth, and no step forward is insignificant. And as you continue embracing your individual path, your mind loses the power to diminish your worth, allowing you to rise with clarity, confidence, and a renewed sense of purpose. Your mind is always listening to the words you speak, the tone you use, and the beliefs behind your language, which means every word you repeat becomes a command that your subconscious learns to obey. When you constantly speak in limitation, saying, "I can't, I'm not good enough," or "this is too hard," you are programming your mind to expect failure, reinforcing patterns that keep you stuck in the same emotional cycles. But when you begin shifting your language toward empowerment, saying, "I can, I will, I am capable," you begin rewriting the internal script that guides your actions and decisions. Words are not just sounds. They are psychological instructions that shape your identity, influence your confidence, and determine the level of effort you bring into every part of your life. When you speak with power, your mind starts believing in your strength, even before you fully feel it. And this belief becomes the foundation for the actions that lead to transformation. This shift requires intentionality, because the mind often defaults to negativity. But with consistent practice, you begin recognizing how deeply your words influence your emotions and behavior. Your language becomes a tool you can use to reinforce discipline, courage, resilience, and purpose, creating a feedback loop that strengthens your mindset each day. When you treat your words as sacred, you stop speaking from fear and start speaking from conviction, which gradually aligns your thoughts with the person you want to become. And once your words begin matching your ambition, your mind can no longer control you with the old stories that once dictated your life. Your mind will always try to convince you that failure is something to fear, something to avoid, or something that reflects your worth as a person. But this is one of the greatest illusions that keeps people stuck in mediocrity. Failure is not a dead end. It is a teacher, a messenger, and a powerful catalyst that reveals the weaknesses you need to strengthen, the strategies you need to refine, and the resilience you need to build. When you stop fearing failure and begin embracing it as part of growth, You take away one of the mind's strongest weapons, the weapon of avoidance. Avoidance keeps you stagnant, weak, and disconnected from your true capabilities, while embracing failure makes you adaptable, courageous, and willing to evolve. Every successful person you admire has failed more times than most people have even tried, and their success was born from the lessons, not the victories. Your mind must learn that failure is not a threat. It's information, feedback, and fuel. When you reframe failure as a stepping stone rather than an obstacle, your inner world shifts, and the fear that once controlled your decisions begins to dissolve. You stop avoiding opportunities, you stop overthinking possibilities, and you start taking action without waiting for perfection. That willingness to act, learn, adjust, and continue is what separates the powerful from the powerless. And when your mind realizes that failure cannot break you, it stops using fear against you, allowing you to move with confidence, clarity, and unwavering determination toward your goals. There comes a time when you must stop waiting for permission and start giving yourself the authority to rise, because the world will not always recognize your potential, but that does not mean you aren't destined for greatness. Too many people hold back their gifts because they believe someone else must validate them before they can take action. But that mindset is exactly what keeps millions of dreams buried beneath doubt and hesitation. Your mind reinforces this belief by telling you that you need approval, support, or encouragement before moving forward. But these are illusions designed to maintain your dependence on external validation. True power begins when you stop relying on the world to affirm your worth and start declaring your value from within. The moment you understand that no one is coming to save you, no one is coming to push you, and no one is coming to hand you the life you want, you awaken a level of responsibility that changes everything. You realize that every step forward is yours to take, and no one can walk your path for you, no matter how much they care or believe in you. This realization is not meant to intimidate you, it is meant to liberate you. Because once you accept full ownership of your destiny, you stop waiting and start doing. You stop asking if you're ready and start preparing. You stop seeking permission and start trusting your intuition. You stop looking for signs and start creating opportunities. And with every powerful decision you make, your mind begins adapting to the truth that you are the one in control, not your fears, not your doubts, and not the expectations placed on you by others. When you take ownership of your path, you reclaim your power piece by piece, and that power becomes the force that transforms your life. Every dream you hold in your heart requires a version of you that your current mindset may not yet be prepared to support. And this is why inner transformation must always come before external success. Your mind tries to convince you that you should wait for conditions to improve, for circumstances to shift, or for life to make room for your greatness. But greatness does not wait. It must be built from the inside out. Success is not something you stumble into. It is something you grow into by shaping your thoughts, strengthening your habits, and elevating your beliefs. If your mindset is not aligned with your vision will remain a fantasy instead of a reality, because your decisions, actions, and emotions will continue reflecting your old identity. This is why self-mastery is essential. You cannot rise higher in life than you rise within yourself. Your mind must be trained, conditioned, and guided toward the future you want, even when it resists, even when it argues, even when it tries to pull you back into familiar territory. Transformation begins when you stop waiting for your environment to change and start becoming the person capable of changing the environment. You do this by choosing discipline over distraction, purpose over comfort, growth over ease, and courage over fear. And the more you choose these things, the more your mind realizes that the old patterns no longer control you. This shift gradually reshapes your identity, preparing you for the life you want. And once your identity aligns with your vision, your external reality begins to reflect the internal power you've built. Underscore. Your mind often convinces you that you need to feel motivated in order to take action. But the truth is that motivation is unreliable, inconsistent, and easily influenced by emotions, distractions, and external circumstances. If you depend on motivation, you will remain stuck in a cycle of temporary effort followed by extended periods of stagnation, because motivation fluctuates and cannot be trusted to guide your life. True transformation comes from discipline, doing what must be done even when you don't feel like it, even when you're tired, even when the mind tries to bargain with you. Discipline is the bridge between intention and execution, between dreams and reality, between potential and achievement. It is the force that keeps you moving when motivation disappears, and the force that builds habits strong enough to carry you through the challenges your mind tries to avoid. When you choose discipline over comfort, you build a level of self-respect that no external achievement can replace, because you prove to yourself that your word matters and your commitment is real. This self-respect becomes the foundation of your confidence, because confidence grows from consistency, not emotion. The more disciplined you become, the less control your mind has over you, because you stop obeying impulsive feelings and start obeying your purpose. And when your purpose becomes stronger than your excuses, your entire life shifts into momentum, steady, unstoppable, and powerful. Underscore. There is a voice inside you that knows you are meant for more. A voice that has whispered to you during moments of frustration, moments of longing, and moments when you felt the weight of untapped potential pressing against your chest. But that voice is often drowned out by the noise of fear, doubt, and insecurity, causing you to mistake your inner calling for unrealistic ambition. Your mind tries to silence this voice because it threatens the boundaries your fears have built. And stepping into your true potential requires courage your mind is not accustomed to using. Yet, that voice is the most authentic part of you, the part that sees beyond your limitations and recognizes the greatness you are capable of. When you begin honoring that voice, even in small ways, you awaken a sense of purpose that your mind can no longer ignore. You start aligning your actions with your deeper truth rather than the temporary emotions that once controlled you. This alignment strengthens your intuition, sharpens your clarity, and deepens your connection to the path you were meant to walk. And as your purpose becomes louder, your fears become quieter, because your mind finally recognizes that your calling is not a threat, it is your direction. This awakening marks a turning point in your life, where you move not from fear but from conviction, not from hesitation but from clarity, and not from self-doubt but from self-belief. Underscore. There is a powerful shift that occurs when you realize you no longer need your mind's permission to grow, because your growth does not depend on comfort, it depends on willingness. Your mind will always resist change because change challenges its sense of familiarity, but familiarity is not the same as happiness, and comfort is not the same as purpose. When you begin choosing growth over comfort, you send a message to your mind that your evolution is non-negotiable. You stop allowing temporary emotions to dictate long-term decisions, and you start making choices based on the person you want to become, rather than the person your fears have conditioned you to be. This shift requires courage, because it forces you to confront uncertainty, discomfort, and the unknown. But it also unlocks a level of power you cannot access while living inside the boundaries of your mind's limitations. Every time you choose growth, you weaken the mind's ability to hold you back. And eventually, you reach a point where discomfort no longer feels like danger, it feels like expansion. This is the moment when your mind stops being a barrier and becomes a tool, a servant, and an ally in your transformation. And once you reach this state, your life begins unfolding with a level of clarity, purpose, and momentum that makes it impossible to return to the person you once were. There is a turning point in every person's life when they must confront the uncomfortable truth that their mind has been operating without conscious supervision, creating loops of negativity, insecurity, and distraction that have shaped their life more than any external circumstance ever could. This realization can feel overwhelming at first because it forces you to acknowledge that much of your struggle has been rooted not in the world around you, but in the thoughts within you, thoughts that have gone unchallenged for years. But this truth is also deeply liberating because once you acknowledge the source of the problem, you gain the power to change it, and that power is something your mind can no longer hide from you. You begin to see how many opportunities you missed because you believed thoughts that weren't true, how many relationships suffered because your mind created stories that distorted reality, and how many dreams were delayed because you allowed fear to dictate your decisions. As painful as these realizations are, they are also the foundation of transformation, because awareness is the first step toward freedom. When you become aware of your mind's patterns, you stop living on autopilot and start taking deliberate control of your internal environment. You begin choosing thoughts that empower you instead of ones that weaken you, and that choice slowly rewrites the internal script that has controlled your life. This process isn't easy because your mind will fight to preserve the familiar patterns it has relied on for years, but your consistency and awareness are stronger than those patterns. Each moment you interrupt a negative thought, question a limiting belief, or replace a doubt with an empowering truth, you reclaim another piece of your power. And over time, those pieces form a new identity, a version of you who thinks with intention, lives with purpose, and rises with strength. One of the most powerful realizations you can experience is understanding that your mind is not always working against you intentionally. It is simply repeating what it has learned, what it has been fed, and what it has been conditioned to believe. Your mind is a reflection of your past, not a prophecy of your future, unless you allow it to be. So many people try to escape their old habits without changing the internal programming that created those habits, and then they wonder why nothing changes. But true transformation requires you to rewrite the mental code that drives your behaviors, and that begins with questioning everything your mind has accepted as truth. You must become a detective of your own thoughts, examining them with curiosity rather than judgment, asking where they came from, who taught them to you, and whether they still serve your purpose. The moment you begin investigating your thoughts instead of blindly obeying them, you shatter the automatic power they once held over you. This is where self-awareness becomes your greatest weapon, because awareness exposes the lies, illusions, and emotional distortions that have influenced your choices. When you see clearly, you choose powerfully. When you understand your patterns, you break their influence. When you recognize your conditioning, you free yourself from it. And with every thought you challenge, you strengthen the connection between your conscious intention and your daily actions. Over time, your mind begins adapting to this new level of awareness, creating thoughts aligned with your growth rather than your fears, and this shift becomes the foundation of your inner liberation. There's a psychological truth that most people never learn. The mind thrives on repetition, and whatever you repeat becomes your reality. If you constantly repeat thoughts of failure, you create a life filled with hesitation. If you repeatedly think in fear, your life becomes filled with avoidance. And if you repeatedly think in limitations, your world becomes small, heavy, and suffocating. But the same principle works in your favor when used intentionally. When you repeat thoughts of strength, your confidence grows. When you repeat thoughts of courage, your resilience builds. And when you repeat thoughts of possibility, your life expands in powerful ways. This is why affirmations, visualization, and intentional self-talk are not cliches. They are tools for rewiring the mind. Tools that reshape neural pathways and strengthen the beliefs that support your growth. Your mind will resist this at first, because repetition of empowerment feels foreign when you have spent years repeating limitation. But with consistent practice, the mind begins shifting toward the new narrative. This shift may feel subtle at first, but over time it becomes revolutionary, affecting how you respond to challenges, how how you pursue opportunities, and how you define yourself. Every repetition becomes a brick in the foundation of your new identity, and every empowering thought becomes a thread in the fabric of your future. When you commit to this repetition, you take control of the one thing that determines everything else, your mindset. And once you control your mindset, there is no challenge too great, no fear too strong, and no obstacle too heavy to prevent you from rising. Underscore. Your mind often mistakes survival for success, and this confusion keeps many people stuck in cycles of mediocrity, because the mind interprets stability, even if it's painful, as safe. It convinces you that maintaining the status quo is better than risking failure, even if that status quo is draining your happiness, restricting your growth, and suffocating your potential. But survival is not the goal of your existence, thriving is. You were not born to remain stuck in patterns that keep you small. You were born to evolve, expand, and experience the full magnitude of your capabilities. When you accept mere survival as your standard, you condition your mind to expect the bare minimum from life, and that expectation becomes a ceiling that limits everything you do. Breaking this cycle requires courage, a willingness to leave behind the familiar discomfort of mediocrity and step into the unfamiliar possibility of greatness. This step is rarely comfortable, because your mind will alert you to every possible danger, every potential failure, and every reason to turn back. But these alerts are nothing more than echoes of your past, not predictions of your future. The moment you stop letting survival instincts dictate your decisions, you begin creating a life driven by purpose instead of fear. You start taking risks that align with your goals, making decisions that elevate your spirit, and embracing challenges that shape your character. And once you choose thriving over surviving, your entire existence begins to shift into alignment with the powerful future you are building. Underscore. There is a profound transformation that occurs when you stop being a passenger in your own mind and start becoming the driver, the creator, and the authority of your inner world. This transformation begins with a single decision, the decision to stop letting thoughts pass through your mind unchecked and start choosing the thoughts that align with who you want to become. Most people live their entire lives reacting to their thoughts instead of directing them. And this reactive existence makes them feel powerless, overwhelmed, and disconnected from their true strength. But when you take control, you start shaping your thoughts the way a sculptor shapes stone, with intention, precision, and vision. Begin eliminating the mental noise that once clouded your clarity and replacing it with intentional focus that strengthens your discipline, confidence, and emotional resilience. The more you take control, the more your mind learns to follow your direction rather than resist it. This shift gives you the power to decide how you respond to challenges, how you interpret experiences, and how you shape your future. You become someone who acts with purpose instead of reacting with fear, someone who leads their life instead of being dragged by their doubts, someone who lives consciously instead of unconsciously. And as this transformation deepens, you begin experiencing life with a level of clarity and strength that most people never access, because most people never dare to confront their mind with unwavering authority. There is a version of you that exists beyond fear, beyond hesitation, and beyond every mental barrier you've ever believed. And your mission in this life is to meet that version, embody that version, and rise into that version with relentless determination. But your mind will try to convince you that this higher version of yourself is unrealistic, unreachable, or too far away, because the mind fears the unknown more than it fears stagnation. It will try to persuade you that staying where you are is safer, even though staying where you are is precisely what destroys your potential. This internal resistance is not a sign that you cannot evolve. It is a sign that you are on the verge of becoming someone your mind has never experienced before. When this resistance appears, most people shrink, retreat, and return to their comfort zone, believing the discomfort means stop, when in reality, the discomfort means breakthrough ahead. The truth is that the greatest transformation in your life will always be preceded by internal friction, because your mind is trying to protect an identity that no longer represents your truth. But if you press forward through the discomfort, if you ignore the mental alarms and choose courage over fear, you begin shedding the layers of who you used to be. With each step, you move closer to the version of you that thinks boldly, acts decisively, and lives powerfully. The path to your highest self is uncomfortable, but it is also the path to the life you've always imagined, one filled with purpose, clarity, confidence, and unapologetic ambition. And when you finally reach that version, you will look back and realize the only thing that ever stood between you and your greatness was the voice in your mind that you eventually learned to silence. Your mind often convinces you that your past defines you, but the truth is that your past only has power over you if you continue carrying it into your present and projecting it into your future. Every mistake you've made, every failure you've experienced, and every painful moment you've endured may have shaped your perspective, but it does not have to shape your identity unless you allow it to. Too many people stay trapped in old stories, repeating narratives that no longer belong to them because their mind has become addicted to the familiarity of the past. But the past is not a prison, it is a lesson, and once the lesson is learned, you have the power to walk free. You must give yourself permission to release the emotional weight you've been holding, because that weight is not protecting you, it is draining you. You cannot rise into your future if you are still anchored to what hurt you, and you cannot become the strongest version of yourself if you continue reinforcing beliefs born from the weakest moments of your life. When you choose to let go, you create space for new possibilities, new opportunities, and new identities to emerge. This release is not an act of forgetting. It is an act of freedom, an act of courage, a declaration that your future is more important than your past. And once you free yourself from the emotional chains of yesterday, your mind loses one of its strongest tools for controlling you. You become untethered, unburdened, and unstoppable, able to move forward without the shadow of who you used to be clouding the path of who you are becoming. There is extraordinary power in understanding that emotions are temporary, but the decisions you make during emotional moments can shape your life for years. Your mind often reacts in emotional impulses, generating fear, anger, regret, or anxiety. And if you obey these impulses, you make choices that reflect temporary feelings instead of long-term purpose. The strongest individuals are not the ones who never feel emotion. They are the ones who do not let emotion dictate their direction. When you learn to sit with your emotions without being controlled by them, you gain a level of maturity and self-mastery that transforms your entire life. You begin recognizing that emotions are signals, not commands, sensations, not instructions. And when you observe your emotions rather than reacting to them, you break the cycle that has caused you to make decisions from a place of weakness instead of strength. This skill turns chaos into clarity, confusion into strategy, and fear into courage. It allows you to stay aligned with your values even when your mind is overwhelmed. And that consistency is what builds an unshakable spirit. Emotional discipline does not numb your feelings. It refines your responses, allowing you to lead your mind instead of being dragged by it. And once you master this discipline, your life becomes a reflection of conscious choice rather than emotional impulse, giving you power over situations that used to control you. Your environment plays a critical role in shaping your mindset. And if you are surrounded by negativity, doubt, and small-minded thinking, your mind will absorb that energy whether you intend it to or not. Mind is influenced by what it sees, hears, and experiences, which means your surroundings quietly program your thoughts every single day. If you are around people who complain, your mind learns complaint. If you are around people who fear change, your mind learns fear. If you are around people who settle, your mind learns to settle too. This is why changing your environment is often the first step toward changing your life, because you cannot rise while being anchored to influences that pull you downward. You must protect your mind from environments that drain your ambition, because those environments are breeding grounds for mental limits. Surround yourself with people who challenge you, inspire you, encourage your growth, and push you beyond your comfort zone, because your mind thrives when exposed to strength and positivity. Even if you cannot physically change your surroundings immediately, you can begin curating your mental environment, books, videos, habits, routines, and thoughts that elevate your spirit rather than diminish it. Your mind becomes what it consumes, and when you feed it power, it begins producing power. When you surround yourself with the right influences, your internal dialogue transforms, your discipline strengthens, and your confidence grows. And when your environment reflects your ambition instead of your fears, your life begins to shift in ways that once felt impossible. Underscore. True freedom begins the moment you realize that you do not have to believe every thought you think, because thoughts are habits, not truths. The mind produces thousands of thoughts each day, many of which are rooted in fear, past experiences, or conditioned patterns that no longer reflect who you are or who you want to become. Most people live as prisoners to these thoughts, reacting to every mental impulse without ever questioning whether it deserves power. But when you develop the ability to let thoughts pass through you without attaching to them, you break the mental chains that once controlled you. You start noticing that many thoughts have no real basis in reality. They are simply emotional echoes that come and go like waves. And when you stop giving power to every thought, your mind becomes quieter, calmer, and easier to direct. This is where you begin experiencing mental clarity, because your focus is no longer hijacked by the noise of unnecessary thoughts. You start choosing which thoughts deserve your attention, which ones align with your purpose, and which ones strengthen your spirit. This level of awareness gives you control over your internal world in a way that most people never experience. You stop being a victim of your mind and start becoming its master. And that mastery allows you to build a life grounded in intention rather than impulse. Once you reach this state, your mind becomes a servant of your vision, not the other way around. There is a moment on every transformational journey when you recognize that the greatest fight you will ever face is not with the world, not with other people, not with circumstances, but with the part of your mind that believes you are not capable of more. That inner resistance is subtle, persistent, and deeply convincing, because it knows your weaknesses, your fears, and your doubts better than anyone else. But what it does not understand is your strength, your potential, or your capacity to rise beyond the limitations it tries to impose. Every day you choose to push forward, even when your mind questions you, you weaken its grip and strengthen your spirit. And with each act of courage, no matter how small, you build internal evidence that you are powerful enough to overcome any obstacle. This evidence becomes the fuel that drives your future decisions, giving you momentum when your mind tries to slow you down. Eventually, you reach a point where the voice of fear becomes a whisper, and the voice of purpose becomes a roar. You begin trusting yourself more than your doubts, and that trust becomes your greatest advantage. The mind can try to resist, but it cannot stop someone who has decided to rise. And the moment you make that decision with unwavering conviction, your transformation becomes inevitable. Every battle you win against your old self brings you closer to the life you were meant to live. Underscore. Your identity is not fixed. It is a collection of beliefs, stories, and habits that you have the power to reshape at any moment. The problem is that most people cling to the old version of themselves because their mind convinces them that change is dangerous, uncomfortable, or unrealistic. But nothing is more dangerous than remaining stuck in an identity that no longer reflects your truth. Growth requires shedding the beliefs that kept you safe but small, breaking the patterns that kept you stable but stagnant, and releasing the fears that kept you comfortable but unfulfilled. This shedding process is emotional, challenging, and sometimes painful. But the pain of staying the same is far more destructive than the pain of evolution. When you boldly redefine who you are, without apology, without hesitation, without seeking approval, your mind has no choice but to follow your lead. And when it does, everything shifts. Your habits strengthen, your purpose sharpens, your clarity deepens, and your confidence expands. Realize you were never limited by life. You were limited by the identity your mind told you to protect. But once you break that illusion, you rise into a version of yourself that feels authentic, powerful, and aligned with the future you are creating. And that is where true transformation begins, not from becoming someone new, but from returning to the person you were always meant to be. There is immense power in understanding that your mind is not your enemy. It is a tool, and tools can be sharpened, shaped, and trained to serve their purpose. Too many people fight their thoughts instead of mastering them, trapped in a cycle of resistance that drains their energy and weakens their spirit. But mastery does not come from fighting the mind. Mastery comes from directing it. You teach your mind where to focus, what to prioritize, how to interpret challenges, and how to support your goals. With consistent practice, your mind begins adopting the discipline, clarity, and resilience you feed it. You start thinking intentionally instead of impulsively, responding strategically instead of emotionally, and choosing purpose over fear in moments that used to break you. This shift creates a ripple effect in every part of your life. Your relationships strengthen, your productivity increases, your confidence grows, and your vision expands. And as your mind becomes your ally instead of your obstacle, you begin to realize that mental mastery is the key to unlocking every other form of success. When you master your mind, you master your life, because every action, decision, and feeling flows from the thoughts you choose to accept. And once you understand this, you reclaim complete authority over your destiny. Underscore. The journey of taking back control of your mind is not a one-time victory. It is a lifelong practice, a continuous process of awareness, adjustment, and growth. There will be days when the old patterns try to return, days when fear speaks louder than courage, and days when doubt feels heavier than determination. But these moments are not signs of failure. They are signs of progress, because they prove you are moving beyond the smallness your mind was once comfortable with. Every challenge becomes a reminder of how far you've come, not a measure of how far you still have to go. And each time you choose discipline over distraction, clarity over confusion, and strength over weakness, you reinforce the identity of someone who refuses to be controlled by their thoughts. With time, you realize that mastery is not about perfection. It is about persistence. It is about showing up for yourself every day with intention, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it's unfamiliar, even when it's hard. And as you persist, you build a mind that aligns with your purpose instead of resisting it. You build a spirit that rises when others fall, a mindset that sees opportunity where others see obstacles, and a life that reflects the greatness you were meant to embody. Underscore. And now you stand at the beginning of a new chapter, a chapter where your mind no longer dictates your destiny, but follows your direction. You have the awareness, the strength, the discipline, and the power to create a life far beyond anything your old fears ever imagined. The only question left is whether you will continue choosing your future over your comfort, your purpose over your excuses, and your potential over your doubts. The decision is yours, and it is a decision you must make every single day. But know this, you are capable, you are powerful, and you are ready. Your mind may resist, but your spirit is stronger, and the life waiting for you is worth every step of this journey. You were not born to live small. You were born to live boldly, fearlessly, and with unshakable purpose. And if you take this message to heart, if you commit to mastering your mind, then nothing, absolutely nothing, will be able to stop you from becoming who you were always meant to be. If this message inspired you, empowered you, or awakened something inside you, Then make sure you subscribe to Daily Global Motivation, because every day we bring you powerful messages designed to help you grow, rise, and take back control of your life. Don't forget to like this video. Leave a comment sharing what part resonated with you the most, and share this with someone who needs to hear this today.